Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. More likely, Ole Miss every day. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, Extra Edition, and I'm here with Derek Vandygriff, and we're going to talk a little baseball. It is the midsummer. We had a couple of days with no major league games. Every year, it's the weirdest thing. Even when I wasn't following Major League Baseball, those 2 days were torturous. Now that I am following baseball, it's even worse somehow. And everything that's going on, the draft being a little later helps, but it's still just not a great time of year, man.
Yeah, it really sucks, quite frankly. That's basically all I watch now is Major League Baseball. I have people ask me all the time about this show and that show, and do you have Netflix and all this and stuff I need to catch up on? I'm like, man, I don't watch anything. If it's not a Major League Baseball game, I don't watch it. I've got my 4 TVs outside. I put 4 games on out there. I let the kids run the other 2 TVs in the living room in here and the TVs in their room, whatever they want to watch. But I mean, if it's not Major League Baseball, I'm not watching it. So it's been an incredibly boring few days for me.
Well, with you watching Major League Baseball, maybe those monitors could get a little bit smaller because the Chicago White Sox, at least their drafting path, they're turning into Ole Miss North. After drafting Calvin Harris and Jacob Gonzalez to go with their Tim Elko. Not only are they drafting Ole Miss players, but they're drafting fan favorite Ole Miss players.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about 3 of the better hitters at their position in Ole Miss history, right? And the White Sox have all 3 of them. So it's definitely a team to follow in the coming years. We've talked about Elko several times on here, in the past few weeks about what he's been doing in the minor leagues. And, they're bringing him along slowly. Me and you both thought he would at least make that jump to Double-A already. But he's in the high A, and he's still crushing the ball right now. And then they bring in Jacob Gonzalez and Calvin Harris. Obviously, 2 really, really good players. They certainly have a type. They want guys that can hit the ball all over the field. You're not talking about guys that are, just have that pull side power. These guys hit it to all fields, and they hit it over the fence to all fields. Elko, Gonzalez, and Harris, all of them, right? Gonzalez, I think, is obviously a really solid pick. Best shortstop in Ole Miss history, I think. It looks like he might stick to shortstop. He really improved his defense his last couple of years at Ole Miss. People thought he might grow into a third baseman. But I think he put those questions to bed. Obviously, the White Sox agreed drafting him that high. You probably don't take Jacob Gonzalez there if you think he's going to grow out of shortstop and move over to third base. So they at least seem to think right now he's going to stick there. And they got a heck of a player and a heck of a hitter, too, because he commands the strike zone as good as anybody I've seen, right? He's not one of those guys that's going to chase that ball over his shoe tops, the slider inside right there. You saw him lay off that early in his career, and he only got better at it as the time went on. And he only swings at pitches in the strike zone and makes hard contact, hits a lot of line drives, and that's kind of where the game's going right now, with all the analytics. You want that line drive rate to be sky high because more times than not, those end up turning into hits. And, Calvin Harris may be one of the better professional overall hitters that's come through Oxford. The 2022 season, we won national championship. He was just lighting the world on fire, and had that shoulder injury, had him out for a few weeks, and but thank God he made it back by the time the end of the season run came, because he stepped right in there and he just kept doing what he was doing. He hit it to all fields again. Left field, right field, hitting it over the fence. And then, again, line drive. He doesn't have quite as good of a feel for the strike zone as Jacob Gonzalez does, but he's able to get the bat head out in front and really drive the ball, unlike a lot of players we've seen come through this program.
In my situation, everybody knows about my lifelong fandom with the Detroit Tigers, and that's starting in March.
And I'm after that 3rd pick.
Yes. And that's exactly what I'm about to talk about. The Florida Complex League, the rookie league for Major League draft picks, where high schoolers and lower-level college players a lot of times end up, they're free admission for fans to go watch the games. Yeah. All the games start at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it's 15 minutes away from my door. And Max Clark is going to be down there in the Florida Complex League. So I'm going to get to watch him play rookie ball, I think.
Yeah, I would sure think so. It's definitely where he's going to start out, I would think, being a high school guy. Look, it was definitely a pick I didn't see coming. I thought for sure that was going to be Langford right there for y'all. You look at the prospects y'all have coming up through the organization that are almost ready to make it to the big leagues, and Langford's one of the three guys in the draft, along with Cruz and Skeens, that I thought could be up in the majors within a couple years tops because of just how polished he is already, and huge power upside with Langford too, and I think he's athletic enough to absolutely lock down a corner outfield position, which would have been pretty big too. But just the raw power and the hitting ability, I thought would have fit y'all pretty nicely. But look, you went with the upside pick there, and a lot of people really liked Max Clark and thought he might have had the highest upside from just an offensive standpoint as anybody in the draft. It's just a little bit of rolling the dice with the high school player there, but maybe it'll end up working out for you. Maybe we look back 4 years from now and say the Tigers absolutely made the right pick there, going with Max Clark instead of Wyatt Langford.
Yeah, it took a little while because I thought it was going to be Langford as well. We were texting back and forth while the draft was going on, and after that draft pick started, and I started to go down that Max Clark rabbit hole, which, by the way, if anybody's bored, go on YouTube and just go down the Max Clark rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's kind of worth it. But I think Max Clark is what Dylan Cruz is. So you're going to have to spend about a year longer in the minors if you're Max Clark. But the idea is for him after 3 years to be what Dylan Cruz is now.
Well, yeah, and then you look at him, he's 18 years old right now, if I'm not mistaken, Max Clark is. So the projectability, right? You look at the frame, and he's got an incredible frame on him, and you think, well, he's 18 now. By the time he gets to 20, 21 years old, and actually gets into a professional organization, gets the right kind of weight on him, starts growing into his body. He's got a really fluid swing, a really pretty swing. He can absolutely mash the ball. So it's. I don't think it's necessarily the wrong pick. It was just the surprising pick. It's absolutely the higher upside pick. You're talking about a guy that might end up being one of the better hitters in the class by the time it's all said and done, and he actually progresses and fills into his body the way that most people project him to.
Yeah, and they also said last thing on this is if this was any other year, he would have probably gone 1-1.
Yeah, absolutely. You had those two guys at the top. That's what made this draft so unique. Is you had the Skeens, Cruz, and Langford. I keep throwing him in there because I still think he's that kind of prospect too. There was a
and Walter Jenkins is a 1-1 level player too.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean the amount of talent that was at the top of this draft though is absolutely insane. Happy for you with your lifelong fandom that you're able to snag one of those guys. Wasn't the guy that I thought, but we'll see how it pans out over the next few years.
Should be pretty good. There's a 30-minute documentary on Max Clark on YouTube, and part of it was them getting Vanderbilt black pinstripe jerseys for Franklin High School.
Oh, okay.
And it's how did they get those? Somebody gifted those to Franklin High School, and and it looks like Vanderbilt, and I was like, come on, guys.
Oh, man, imagine
come
that,
on.
right? Let's put two and two together, right? But it could have been his big TikTok influence, too. He's a big TikToker, apparently, 100,000 or whatever followers. So, maybe he got a little bit of scratch off of that, too. Who knows?
Yeah, and apparently he is just an asshole on the baseball field.
Yeah, well,
and to go to an organization that is its founding father and its most known player is Ty Cobb, that kind of fits.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it'll fit right in.
All right, so Ole Miss is facing what I'm calling a Cooper Pratt dilemma. Now, after Pratt slid past the third or fourth round, I sensed optimism from people around Ole Miss. Once it got taken in the sixth, there was still optimism that he's not going to sign his numbers too high.
Yeah.
But apparently the Milwaukee Brewers were budgeting for his number, and his number wasn't as high as we thought it was. And he's going to end up with the Brewers. But the problem with that is, what is Ole Miss baseball going to do? I saw somebody after it happened said T.J. McCants. Well, McCants is now at Alabama.
Yeah, that's not going to be it.
And so Ole Miss is looking at basic middle infielders to fill this role. Have we heard anything about Leger?
Nothing official. I expect him to be back, but hasn't been announced yet. We're a few days after the draft. You see all these undrafted free agent contracts already start popping and all that. And, it's not only Leger, it's Rivas, who's already announced that he is coming back, but you've also got Ethan Groff. There's nothing been done there either. So I expect both of those guys to be back, Leger and Groff, along with Xavier Rivas, which is going to be a big shot in the arm for us. I think Leger steps right in and takes over second base for us. I think that's where his spot's going to be. On the Cooper Pratt deal, I know he went in the 6th round. That's such a low slot value. But kind of like you said, the Brewers knew exactly what they were doing. They were not taking Cooper Pratt in the 6th round without knowing exactly what his number was going to be and what he was going to sign for. And they knew for a fact when they drafted him that he was absolutely going to sign. And they made the necessary picks the 5 rounds prior to that to make sure that it did happen. It was disappointing to see Pratt go. I kind of, like you, started feeling good after the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, right? The slide was on then, and if you could just get to the bottom, you get out of the 10th round, then you're in good shape. But he ended up not making it, but good for the kid, right? I mean, go catch it when you can, wishing nothing but the best with the Milwaukee Brewers. So, but now Ole Miss as a whole, we don't have a shortstop on the roster, quite frankly. Technically, Leger could play shortstop. I believe he played it in JUCO. But like I said, I think he's going to play second base, and we have a hole there. Our shortstop isn't on the roster yet. It will be. I have a feeling it's going to come through the transfer portal. I mean, it just has to at this point, right? That's one thing to keep an eye on right now. One guy I'm keeping an eye on, the Arizona State shortstop Hill that got into the transfer portal. I know he's from Baton Rouge, and that's what everybody keeps hollering, LSU. But that's a crowded middle infield down there in Baton Rouge right now. And maybe they take him anyway and just take all the athletes and just decide to figure it out, right? I mean, that's kind of what Ole Miss does anyway with shortstops over the years. It's kind of ironic we're in this position because we'll sign any shortstop we can get our hands on, and then we'll teach them to play center, left, right, second, whatever. Just give us the athlete and we'll figure it out. But it's a little crowded down there on the Bayou right now, though. I think that may be where he wants to go, but there's a clear path to playing time in Oxford. We're a top-tier program. We're going to be able to pay NIL-wise because we've lost all these guys to the draft, right? You don't have Muth, Pratt. You don't have those guys coming back. So, your war chest should be filled a little more than it was what you were planning on if those guys were to come. So, get out there, spend those dollars, and keep your eye on the Arizona State shortstop. And if not him, I'm sure we'll jump on somebody else that comes in.
All right, so let's look at the Ole Miss baseball team as a whole. Obviously, we need to hit the portal for a shortstop because that got decimated through the draft and through both ways, both directions in the draft. Now, what are we looking at? We obviously, with Xavier Rivas coming back, we're returning what should be our starting both 3 weekend starters.
Yeah.
So that's good news.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the Rivas one's really interesting because you got to think you still got Hunter Elliott waiting in the wings, right? If he's able to make it back and be anything close to he was as a freshman for Ole Miss, right? Now you've got Elliott, Rivas, Saunier, and JT Quinn. You got 4 guys with SEC weekend starting experience coming back next year. Obviously, you can't start all 3 of them on the weekend or all 4 of them on the weekend if all 4 of them are ready to go. So that bumps one to midweek bullpen use, something like that. So with Rivas coming back, that builds a little bit more depth. Left-handed pitching was obviously a concern for us going into this offseason. Got Rivas back, got the kid out of Coastal Carolina to add to the pen too. He's a lefty, a high upside guy. So, he throws the ball hard too, a consistent mid-90s fastball. So that'll be nice to add to the bullpens. We got a couple lefties in there. Now we got to lock down shortstop like we talked about, just get as many arms and hitters as we can right now. You think you'll have Furness at first base, Udemark at DH, Leger second, and then you got Fisher at third, right? And if Groff comes back, which looks like he is, he's in center. You got the kid from Mercer I would assume play right field. So you got another corner infield spot to fill, or corner outfield spot to fill there, and we got a couple options on the roster for that. Mainly John Kramer would be my assumption there. So Smith making it through the draft, making it to campus from Oxford, that was big for us, getting our catcher locked up for the next few years. So you really want to stockpile arms, though. Go find a shortstop, and then if there's any arms out there that you think can get outs in the SEC, then sign them, bring them to Oxford, and just get a big pile of them, throw them in there, and just see what you got and mix and match them any way you can.
Yeah, right before we get out of here, the one thing that even with Cooper Pratt going pro, the thing that hurts more is the JD Urso thing.
Yeah, I know that was kind of a weird deal.
Yeah.
Him just leaving school, and maybe he was homesick or whatever. I don't know. I don't have any information on the deal. I would imagine it kind of blindsided the coaches a little bit. I'm sure if they thought there was a chance he would show up to campus and then leave, then they probably would have gone in a different direction. But that's the way it works, though. If the kid didn't want to be there, then let him move on. Wish him the best. I certainly do. And then you put your head down, go to work, and go find the next guy.
Hey, we've all been to Oxford. We've all lived in Oxford or near Oxford. Oxford's a wonderful place. Yeah. Oxford's not Tampa, Florida. Tampa, Florida is one of the best places in the world.
Yeah. So it's definitely a little different for him. I definitely get it.
Yeah, it is really nice. I just like driving through Tampa. I have to go out there to my VA stuff and all of the stuff with my brain surgery when I go over to the doctor, and I just like driving through it. It's just a pretty place.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every dayers later on, I think it might be next week. We have to set up the exact day, but Charles Stackhouse is going to be coming on the program. So we'll talk to, Charles is a fantastic interview, and he is going to be talking football, and I just like having Charles on the show. But it should be a lot of fun. Anyway, Derek, thank you very much for stopping by, and we will catch you, I would say, a little bit later, but it could be next week depending on the transfer portal, right?
Yeah. We kind of got to just let it play out a little bit at this point.
Yeah, seriously. Anyway, you have a good weekend, man.
You too, bud. Hotty toddy.
Hotty toddy.